We are in Genesis 1 this morning. As the famous Oxford mathematician and brilliant Christian apologist John Lennox described it as 7 days that divide the world. And they do divide the world. I have to thank Dr. Hugh Ross. Dr. Ross is a well-known reasons.org. And I have to give credit because a lot of the material that I'm going to be presenting is based on some of the information that Dr. Ross has presented. I reached out to him and he was actually very kind to share with me some of his information. So I have his blessing in moving forward with this. Genesis 1 can be really divisive. It certainly can divide the church. You have the young earth believers and you have the old earth believers. You have those who believe in a literal 7 days, those who believe in a figurative 7 days, those who say the orientation and the order of events is literal, those who say it's allegory. It's also divisive in the scientific community. There are scientists who say that the Bible doesn't make sense scientifically. Genesis 1 doesn't make sense scientifically. And on that basis, I just can't believe the Bible. I can't become a Christian based on that. At the very beginning, I want to implore you, I beg you, please do not let Genesis 1 become some type of Spanish Inquisition. Okay? Do not let Genesis 1 be a test for orthodoxy. When we get to heaven, God is not going to ask us whether we believed in a literal 7 days or a figurative 7 days. He's not going to ask us whether we believed in a young earth creation or an old earth creation. He's going to say what? Did you accept Jesus as Lord and Savior with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength? That's it. Everything else beyond that is majoring in the minors. That's not what's going to get us into heaven. So please don't let Genesis 1 be a test for orthodoxy. Do not, please, let it divide brothers and sisters, because that's not the intent, okay? Our theme verse for today comes out of Peter. Peter said, "Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is within you, yet with gentleness and reverence." And it's really sad how few Christians feel well equipped to defend what we believe. And we get asked by non-Christians, why do you believe that? Why do you believe Genesis 1? Why do you believe Jesus rose from the grave? That doesn't make any sense at all. And Jesus is saying, as believers, we have to be ready to give a defense, to be able to give an account. Why do we believe that? So my hope for today, and if I ever have the opportunity to present again in the future, which, by the way, I've said to Ed and Kathleen, I'm willing to come once a month until you get a new pastor, so at least there's some continuity. My goal and my hope and my prayer is that I can equip you to be able to defend your faith accurately, comfortably, confidently. We've got 3 key points that we're going to cover, and we're going to try to cover these very briefly. One is the frame of reference. Second is, what's the definition of a day? And then we're going to look at the specific order of creation events. Again, many people say the Bible doesn't make sense scientifically. As a physician, by definition, I'm a scientist. And we're going to look at that from a scientific perspective, but don't worry, I'm not going to overwhelm you with science geeky stuff. This is really, really exciting when you see what's going on, especially with scientific discoveries, okay? But before we start, let's go right to the very beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what's interesting here is the word universe does not appear anywhere in the Old Testament. In fact, there's not even a biblical Hebrew word for universe. But the phrase heavens and earth occurs 13 times in the Old Testament. And every time that phrase appears, it refers to the totality of physical existence, space, time, matter, and energy. Everything that physically exists. That's what the heavens and the earth refers to. So right at the very beginning, Genesis 1 is saying God created everything that physically exists in the universe. The point is, the universe had a beginning. Over the last 100 years, there have been at least 30 space-time theorems that have been developed. Each one of these space-time theorems all points to a singularity. Every single one points to a starting event from which everything else came. And that is no longer disputed even among the atheists. Alexander Vilenkin is a very famous astrophysicist. And he said, with the proof, not the suggestion, not the opinion, with the proof now in place, cosmologists are people who study the origin of the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. All of the what? Opinion? No. All of the evidence. These are atheists. All of the evidence says that the universe had a beginning. There was a big bang. As Christians, we maintain that God was the one who banged it. Okay. Scientists will often say, unless you show me a miracle, I can't believe in God. Well, what greater miracle is there than a God who created everything from nothing? Think about this. Something can't create itself, can it? Whatever gets created has to be created by something outside of the creation. So space, time, matter, and energy can't create themselves. They have to be created by something outside of that, something that transcends that. The Bible says that's God. Non-Christians will say, well, then who created God? Don't fall for that gotcha question, because the same question can be asked of the materialists. Those who say, well, the universe was started by a universe-generating mechanism that generated the multiverse and millions of universes. Great. What created the universe-generating mechanism? You can always retrodict that question backwards. You see what I'm saying? So atheists throw that out as a gotcha question, but you can just easily turn around and ask the same question of them. It's really not a gotcha question. The question really boils down to, when you look at all the evidence, what makes the most sense? In science, there are different ways of looking at data and trying to interpret the data. There is inductive reasoning. That's where you do an experiment and you have an hypothesis and you see if the experiment produces the desired results. Well, you can't do that with history. With history, you have to look back and say, based on all of the evidence that we see in history, what explanation makes the most sense for what happened? In science, that's called inference to the best explanation. Let's use an analogy, okay? You look outside and there's water everywhere. There's water in the street, water on your lawn, water in the driveway, water on your car. What's the logical conclusion? It rained, absolutely, okay? What if you look outside and there's only water on the car and on the driveway around it, but not on your driveway, not on the lawn, not on the street, not on your neighbor's lawn? Now you have to say, okay, what are the possibilities? Well, either there was a really strange microburst and it just rained on my car, or somebody just washed the car. Which inference gives you the best explanation? And when you look at the totality of scientific evidence, the evidence that leads to the best explanation is that there was an intelligence that created the universe. Okay, that's the foundation. Okay, looking at our 3 points. Point number 1, frame of reference. A dramatic shift occurs from Genesis 1 to Genesis 2. And if you miss this change in frame of reference, indeed, Genesis 1 makes absolutely no sense. What changes from Genesis 1 to Genesis 2? In Genesis 1, God created the heavens and the earth, and he's above everything. He's above the earth looking down. But in Genesis 1, verse 2, it says the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Do you catch the change in the frame of reference? God is no longer above the earth. He is now hovering over the face of the waters. That's a dramatic, dramatic change in the frame of reference. Now, what a lot of Christians don't know is that a lot of what we know about creation actually doesn't come from Genesis 1. It actually comes from Job. Do you know that Job is the oldest book in the Bible? It predates Genesis by 500 years. Let's look at what Job says about the creation of the earth. We're in starting verse 3, chapter 38. Imagine that you're Job, because this is God talking to Job, okay? This is God saying, brace yourself like a man. Can you imagine God saying that to you? He's basically saying, suck it up, buttercup. I'm about to drop the hammer on you, okay? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched out a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. And here's the key. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds the garment of the sea and wrapped the sea in thick darkness. What an eloquent description of what initial earth creation was like from Job, 500 years before Genesis. So we know from Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, there are four initial conditions when the earth was made. Condition number one, water covers the entire surface of the earth. Condition number two, clouds covered the earth in thick darkness. The earth was empty and it was unfit for life. So again, looking at it graphically, our frame of reference now becomes, here's the earth, the darker blue is the ocean, and then the lighter blue is the thick atmospheric layer that's shrouding the earth in darkness. So our frame of reference in verse 2 is no longer out here, it's right here, above the surface of the water, okay? If we get that frame of reference wrong, everything else is wrong. Even Galileo, who was a Christian, said, if you interpret the Bible with the wrong frame of reference, you'll get it wrong. And you know, folks, we as Christians do this all the time. We get the frame of reference all the time. How many of you, and you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you have been in a Bible study and you read a passage and the Bible study leader says, what does that mean to you? Right? We've all been in that situation. Wrong frame of reference. Why? There's only one meaning. What did the original author mean to the original audience at the time of the original writing? That's the meaning, not what it means to me. What did the original author mean? The correct question is, how do I apply the lessons of that to my life? Not what's the meaning, but how does it apply to my life? That's why getting the frame of reference is so important, okay? Let's talk about the days, okay? There's only one Hebrew word for day, yom. It has four literal and distinct meanings. It can mean part of the daylight hours. It can mean all of the daylight hours. It can mean one 24-hour calendar day, or it can mean a finite but extended period of time, an epoch. One word, four distinct literal meanings. We have the same problem in English. Consider the following statement. Today, I'm going to tell you what it was like back in my day. In that one phrase, there are multiple possible meanings of the word day. Today, right now, right at this point in time, or today, at this point in our lives. I'm going to tell you what it was like back in my day, back in that finite but limited period of time in the past. You see? English, one word, three different meanings in the same sentence. Okay? So the word day in Genesis 1 can mean a literal 24 hours, but it doesn't have to. What sets the stage? The context. Okay? Moving on from days, let's look at the actual creation events. Okay? Before I go that, I love this verse. Do not let this one fact escape you. With God, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like one day. Okay? All right, moving on. If you look at the first 6 days, each of the first 6 days ends with an evening morning phrase. There was evening and there was morning, day 1. There was evening and there was morning, day 2. Each day has a definitive start and stop time. Okay? And the days are consecutive. There is no reason not to read Genesis 1 literally in this sense, because some people have said that the creation days are metaphorical and you can jumble all the days around and it's just kind of a haphazard type of thing. Right now, I'm reading in the book of Ezekiel. Okay? In Ezekiel, it does not follow chronologically from start to finish. The end of Ezekiel talks about something that happened before the beginning of Ezekiel. That's not how Genesis 1 reads. Genesis 1 reads in a literal, organized, step-by-step fashion. What's interesting is that with day 7, there's no evening or morning phrase, is there? Why? For the first 6 days, God was busy with the work of creation. Why is there no evening and morning phrase at the end of day 7? Because we are in day 7, friends. Day 7 has not ended. At the end of day 6, God rested. Rested from what? He rested from creation. Does that mean he stopped all activity? No. He stopped creation. But he is continuing to today with the very important work of redemption. He is still busy. But as you'll see on the scientific record, there's no new creation. That's why there's no evening and morning phrase at the end of day 7. Okay? Let's look at day 1. God said, let there be light, and there was light. Notice it doesn't say God created the light. Why? The light was already created at the very beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, and everything that was there. So the sun and the moon are not created on day 1. What does this mean? This means that, remember, the earth is covered with a thick shroud of dark clouds. That shroud starts to thin out just enough that there's the perception of light and darkness, just enough filtration of the light in the heavens to come through. Okay? That's day 1. That's an important point. Not created the sun and the moon. Light began to shine through. What happened on day 2? On day 2, God separated the waters above from the waters below. Okay? So imagine that you've got this thick cloud of moisture overlying the earth. The earth is covered with water, moisture everywhere, not a drop to drink, as the saying goes, okay? God separates those. He calls the waters above heaven and the waters below the seas, okay? Some think that this separation of this massive amount of water is what ultimately led to the 40 days of the flood. In order to have that much moisture suspended in the atmosphere, that it rained that much. That's just a conjecture, just food for thought, okay? But the importance of this separation is it set up an elaborate water cycle on Earth, where you have the liquid precipitation intermingled and cycling around with the frozen precipitation. Why is that important on day 2? It's important on day 2 because without water, you don't have life. Okay? Here's a picture of Africa, okay? Mount Kilimanjaro. How can you have snow-capped mountains in Africa? But it's essential because that year-long melting of that ice cap is what feeds the dry land beneath it. There's an elaborate water cycle. And without that elaborate water cycle, there's no life. Again, we look to Job 37 and 38. The breath of God produces ice and the broad waters become frozen. He loads the clouds with moisture. He scatters his lightning through them. At his direction, the clouds swirl around over the face of the earth to do whatever he commands. He brings the clouds to punish people or to water the earth and show his love. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispensed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a wasteland? Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? See how much information there is about creation in Job. It's really incredible, okay? Moving into day 3, there's the appearance of the land masses, okay? Now this is important. Let the dry ground appear, and it was so. God called the dry ground land, and he gathered the seas, waters, and he called the seas. Prior to the 1950s, or 1960s actually, it was believed by scientists that the continents always existed, not in their necessarily current form, but the amount that they dominated the surface of the water, surface of the earth. 27% of the earth is covered with land. Okay? 93% is covered with water. Prior to the 1950s, it was assumed that the landmass was existent in its entirety. Something really happened in the 1960s, though. The geophysical discipline of plate tectonics was invented. And they discovered, whoa, wait a second. Those land masses weren't present from the beginning after all. They said they were somewhere from 0 to 10%. And over the 3.8 billion years of Earth history, those land masses gradually became more and more prominent. Well, the story doesn't end there, folks. God's not about to be mocked, because as science continues to unfold, something really interesting starts to happen. The geophysicists realize, oh, wait a second, actually, that's not what it was at all. In the year 2000, they recognized, well, wait a second, there may be more of a sudden appearance to the land masses. It doesn't stop there. In 2018, a pivotal event was discovered. It was called the deep oxygenation cycle, where the oxygen content in the earth jumped suddenly from 1% up to about 4%. And coincident with that deep oxygenation cycle, they discovered something very interesting. They discovered a sudden appearance of the land masses. So for the first 2 billion years, there was no land. The earth was covered with water. At about the halfway point in Earth's life, sudden appearance of land masses. So as science continues to unfold, we start to see how things start to shape up. Why is this significant? The land masses appear halfway through Earth's life. Where do the land masses appear in the Genesis record? Day 3, halfway through the creation story. Coincidence, maybe? I don't think so. Okay? So you see, science is starting to line up with the biblical account. Okay?